to the sheet. And we're recording now, and so that means we're on Facebook Live, so you'll see that as well. And what I wanted to do was to just start as we do. I'm going to mute everybody for this first part, and okay, good. And so I ask you to join me in the blessing for study, either in the blessing as a whole, or you can simply say Amen at the very end. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So the sheet that I had started with last time is it's kind of a summary or a synopsis of a book that was written by Arthur Green, and it is the title of the book is Judaism's 10 Best Ideas. And last time we had the opportunity to look at the first of those, that of joy, of having this attitude toward life that infuses everything that we do. I brought in a little bit of the Musar in terms of the balancing, that joy is a midah, one of the midot, and that joy in every situation is not necessarily appropriate, and that really the joy is an ideal, but it also is something that we hold in balance as we do with every midah, and that the midot don't exist in silos separate one from the other, but influence one and the other. And really the whole idea is for us to be able to work on this, this spiritual curriculum, if you will, of how it is that we can become better in order to build a better world, essentially. And so these 10 ideas really are also at the root of Musar and what Musar is guiding us towards. So or what it's trying to guide us towards. And so if we look at the second of these ideas, which is the Tzelem Elohim. So if you can look at that, and I can also share my screen so that if you don't have it right in front of you, I can share this. And okay. Nope, that did not work the way I wanted it to. Are you seeing the Tzelem Elohim? Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that. Okay, good. All right, so it's just showing up a little bit differently than, okay, good. So if you look at that, you can see that this Tzelem Elohim is from the book of Genesis, the creation of the world. This is the sixth day of creation, and one of the last things on the sixth day of creation that God creates is the first human being. The Hebrew is Vayivra Elohim et Adam b'tzalmo b'tzelem Elohim bara oto zachar u'nekeva bara otam. And the way that this is usually translated, you have right here, and God created man in God's image. In the image of God, God created him. Male and female, God created them. So the verse is a very interesting verse for lots of different reasons. First, the big question is, of course, what does it mean to be created in the image of God? What does that mean? And the other is that it goes from the bara oto, from the singular, right? That God creates this first human. And that's in the A part of the verse. In the B part of the verse, it says, male and female, God created them, right? So it moves from the singular into the plural. And there's a lot to have conversation around that as well. And so what I want to do is I'm going to open it up for just discussion of the verse itself. And I want us to kind of understand and to look at this verse together. I'm going to stop the share for a moment because I want to be able to see everybody. And I'm going to unmute, but if you'll kind of raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you, so that way we can not talk upon each other. I can see everybody's hand and we can go like that, or you can indicate. So questions about the verse itself, about this Tzelem Elohim, about the movement from the singular to the plural in the creation. Okay, so so let me talk a little bit about about at least what the let's see, okay, there we go. That what the rabbis understand of this is that they part of the answer is they don't know exactly what it means to be created in the image of God, right? That that it can't. What they do understand is that this can't be a literal teaching, right? That literally we look like God in that physical sense. That was something that they agreed was not what was meant by the verse. So why do we have this idea presented here is a question that they begin to address in terms of how we are supposed to see ourselves, right? As not just a part of the creation, as you know, the grass and the fish and the trees and other animals are part of the creation, but there's something unique about the human creation, right? This is not a part of the description of any other aspect of creation. There's no image of God implanted in anything else or used to create anything else other than the first human being. So on the one hand, the right say, okay, so this is something that distinguishes us from the rest of creation. And so then what do we recognize in ourselves as being that difference? And for some rabbis, that claim is that's the soul, right? That we're the only creatures, the only part of creation that has a soul that has been implanted within us, that's the image of God, or that's what is the essence or the aspect of God that resides within us, or that is reflected in us. And there are other midrashim that take it in a different direction, that it's not so much about us but about God. And there's one relatively well-known midrash that on this verse that talks about how that God is so different and so much more powerful in terms of what God can do, that you know the custom of kings of the day was to create coins that were stamped with their image, right? And every coin had the same stamp, had the same image on it of the king. And that, just look at what God does. God has stamped each of us with God's image, and yet each of us looks completely different one from the other. And that's kind of the majesty, the glory of what God is able to do, that no one else is able to do. No human being is able to do. That this is something that is unique and sets God apart. And in turn, with that being said, and taking actually a little bit more of a literal approach to this, a physical approach to it, it is to counsel us, guide us in how we are to treat one another, right? So that if I see you as representing God, as representing God's image, and I see your face in that regard, a number of things should happen, right? So I should treat you with respect, with kindness, with honor, that you are, in a sense, God's messenger, God's representative. You reflect that divine in you, right? And and at the same time, what I would add on to that now is that perhaps there's an element of being less judgmental, less critical, not only of how other people look, right, but how we ourselves look, right? That somehow, in some way, no matter what I think of myself, whether I think of myself as handsome, as ugly, as heavy, as thin, as whatever adjectives I might ascribe to myself, right? To be very careful of that, because in a sense, I'm kind of criticizing God's work. Is that so to be able to see the goodness, the sacred, the divine in another person as well as in ourselves should really moderate and not even moderate, but mediate the way that we speak, the way that we think, the way that we judge, or the way that we refrain from judging. All within it, wrapped up in this idea of this Tzelem Elohim, this somehow being imbued or created in a way that reflects the divine. Right? So let me pause there for a moment and allow for comment, discussion, questions, concerns, rebuttals. Aline?
This may sound like a bizarre question, so forgive me in advance. So in essence, do we belong to God? Do we belong to ourselves? I was thinking about it because I was thinking about being created in the image of God. And then what does that mean when I don't take care of myself? What does it mean if I don't exercise for X amount of time, or if I don't eat well, or I do things that I know are not in the best interest of my creation? And it just had me reflecting on, is that my obligation to myself? Is that my obligation to God? And wondered what you might think about that.
Right. So that's great, and you're absolutely right. So the idea is that being created in the divine image, that the bodies actually belong to the Creator, and that and I don't even think we need to take it quite that far. But let's go in that direction first, and then I'll take it in a different direction next. I think in that direction, if it doesn't belong to us, then we can't do whatever we want to, right? And it kind of flies in the face of a little bit of our bodies ourselves, that it's a little bit different. But I don't think we need to take it into an anti-abortion or a pro-choice or anti-choice kind of a thing. But the notion that it's if I want to smoke, I'll smoke, kind of a thing. It's no, that's not really a Jewish perspective, because we know that smoking is absolutely harmful to everyone. And then we have science and medicine, and it's not that it might, it's that it will, right? We also know that eating well is something that's important. Taking care, going to the doctor to get your annual checkup, all of the things that are we're told this is how you lead a healthy life, right? That that's something that we should continue to do, and that it's the and it moves into the area of what can we do to our bodies, or what are you forbidden from doing to our bodies? Tattoos are always a big question, right? That in the Torah, it's very clear, you're not supposed to make any kind of permanent marks on your body. You can't cut yourself, you can't, and the Torah was really reflecting on not just this, the body is a gift and you know, the body belongs to God, but it was also anti-idolatry, because so many of the pagan practices of that day involved self-mutilation, involved permanent marks on your body, and so that was something that was forbidden, but also gets a little bit relaxed, because the counterpoint to that is the culture in which you're living, what's culturally accepted as an adornment, right? So pierced ears are the best example, right? So if you follow strictly what the Torah says, you know, you can't punch a hole in your ear, right? That's something that's a mutilation of the body. And mutilation seems like a strong word when you're talking about piercing an ear, but it falls into that same category, except that the rabbis in the Talmud were asked the question, well, what if I'm doing it not to mutilate myself, but what if I'm doing it to make my body more beautiful, right? To make my appearance more beautiful. I'm doing it not to denigrate my body, not to take something away, but actually to add to, right? And that this is a culturally accepted norm. This is what you do, or this is something you can do to beautify the body. And so pierced ears then become an accepted cultural norm for Judaism, as well as the external culture. It's interesting to see today how tattoos are evolving along that same thing of not just as a part of adornment, but many people get tattoos because of significant events, right? To acknowledge significant events, both happy and tragic. And so that, you know, they become more and more ubiquitous. We see tattoos all over. And so, you know, one of the I'm reluctant to use this, but I find that it becomes incredibly relevant right now. Fake Talmud, right? So there's the phrase right now is fake news, right? So there's also fake Talmud. So fake Talmud is that if you have a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, right? Nowhere in the Talmud does it say that. It's never, but somehow that becomes, you know, the accepted wisdom that, of course, you know, the Talmud says this, and of course Judaism is against this, and but it's not true. But the reason that it becomes something that people talk about is because it is that permanent mark. It's taking the Tzelem Elohim, this divine image, and altering it in a permanent way. But if you alter it in a permanent way with the idea of towards adornment, then it becomes acceptable, or it becomes okay to do that. So it swings. So that's on the one side, that our bodies don't belong to us, that belongs to God, and we have a responsibility and obligation to take care of what doesn't belong to us, right? So the other side of it is looking at it as a gift, right? Now, once I give you a gift, you know, it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with it, right? Hopefully, it's a gift that you appreciate, that you treasure, that you want to take care of, and that you will act responsibly with this gift, whatever it happens to be. And so they almost merge together, but with a different, one comes with responsibility and one comes with obligation, right? So if it doesn't belong to you, you're obligated to take care of it. Well, it does belong to me, so now I have a responsibility to take care of it, right? So they run parallel, but I think with a different degree of severity, perhaps, or more of more of a choice involved with what you do with a gift versus what you do with something that doesn't belong to you in the first place. So let me pause again and unmute and see if there's follow-up or there are other questions. Oh, Ilan? Yeah?
So, Rabbi, when I was thinking about what you were saying in terms of the peer steers, you know, some cultures in the past have had other kinds of things that they do to their self.
Sure.
And to me, that is a sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Because if you don't do that, then you're not part of the community. Okay. And if you do, then you're recognized as part of the community. And I don't have it in front of me, but in the writing, it says, and then it was them.
It goes from the singular to the plural, right? Yes.
Right. And I was thinking about that as a plural, we have the obligation to do things together to help people going from singular to plural. Yes, you have your talents singularly, and then you put them together, and we have the obligation for, as Temple would say, the joy of belonging and doing things together as a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I think that yes, it's the part of living in community, right? Is taking on the norms of that community, right? That if you want to be, considered a full participating member of the community, and certain rituals, certain activities, certain forms of dress as well become a part of that. And so there is a point at which if the rules of Judaism, if the laws of Torah come into conflict with the norms of the culture, Torah usually wins out, right? And unless, again, it can be, if it can be balanced and resolved, right? Like with pierced ears, which is, something that I think is pretty universally accepted as adornment. It's not self-mutilation. There are other kinds of permanent changes to the body that are a little more controversial, right? So there is the question that was raised about, how you're not supposed to put your life at risk needlessly, right? So there's arguments about different sorts of risky behavior that that should be avoided, right? But where this comes together with what we do with our bodies is with elective surgery, right? So and cosmetic surgery, right? So any kind of surgery, a doctor will tell you, is a risk, right? I mean, there's always a risk. Sometimes it's a minimal risk, but it's a risk, right? And so how do you play out that balance of the risk of cosmetic surgery versus the benefit of the cosmetic surgery? Because the argument can be made that, if I want to feel better about myself, and this is how I'm going to do it, or so it becomes a little bit fuzzier there. If the cultural norm is that everybody should have a small nose, right? And I feel like my nose is way bigger than what everybody else has. Do I what do I do about it? And because plastic surgery, particularly rhinoplasty, is I once had it described to me. It's a very violent, horrible surgery. But for many people, it is something that is necessary, that they feel is necessary for themselves. I'm not talking about somebody who has a deviated septum or somebody who's had a broken nose and it needs to be, those sorts of things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who is perfectly healthy and has made a decision to alter, whether it's a facelift or something, whatever other kinds of surgery are done. And I'm not talking about reconstructive surgery after a mastectomy. That's, it's in a different category. But again, these are all questions that arise from this verse and how it is that we understand it, right? So the other element of it, which is, again, it becomes, it resonates differently today to say that the first human being was created as one, right? So it wasn't male, it wasn't female, it was a human being, right? And so I think of it especially in how we talk about gender now, how we talk about sexual orientation, how we talk about the fluidity of identity, and that here, the very first human being was simply created as a human being, without sex, without gender. It was simply the identity of a human, and that as part of that creation then gets split into two entities. One is called Zachar, Hebrew for male. One is called Nekeva, the Hebrew for female. And so how do we, how does this verse inform how we understand gender fluidity, how we understand transgender, how we understand, that. So I think it opens up an opportunity to have a different kind of conversation, that if the Tzelem Elohim, this image of God, is created in that first human being as a single unity, then what does that mean for our conversation about gender today and what it means? It used to be, back in the day, this verse was used at a wedding ceremony, right? That in the beginning, there was one human being. They were split into male and female, and the couple standing under the chuppah, you have found your match, right? You found the one that makes you whole, right? So now you're that one human being again, as God originally created, right? Today I don't use that verse for lots of different reasons, and not the least of which is, oftentimes I'm doing a wedding for somebody who's been married before, right? So, what does that say about the first marriage, and what does it say about the second marriage? And so it doesn't make it doesn't make for as nice a homily as it might have in the past. But today I see it as really talking about how we understand human sexuality, how we understand gender identity, and at least how we talk about it. Maybe even not how we understand, but at least how we have the conversation that can lead to understanding of people who identify not in a binary way, not as, well, I'm a boy, I was born a boy, I've always been a boy. But that we understand that it's not just a binary system. So that comes from the singular to the plural. And so let me pause there for a moment and open up for comment, question, rebuttal. Yeah, Lynn.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about tattoos and stuff, because when my son was in his MOS school, he's a Lance Corporal in the United States Marines, he went and got a tattoo. And I almost had a fit about it. And when my mother finally found out that he had the tattoo, she said to me, well, he can never be buried in a Jewish cemetery. And I'm like, Mom, he's, what was he, 18 years old at the time? No, 18, he was 19 years old at the time. I'm like, Mom, what am I going to do? He's a Marine. What do they have next to all the bases? Tattoo parlors. One of his friends must have influenced him, and he got a tattoo. So then he got a second tattoo, which was a bunch of writing, and I really don't even understand that one. But he once called me and said to me, can I have the VIN number to my Mustang? I said, what do you want to do with your VIN number to your Mustang? He says, I want to put a tattoo on it. I said, no. So he put my name above his heart, which was nice, except he put my whole first name and my last name. So, you know, I deal with that now, but that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Charles.
A friend of ours tells the story of his daughter wanting to get a tattoo when she was, let's say, a teenager. And he said to her, you know, if you'd gotten a tattoo when you were 6, it would be of My Little Pony. And I'm not sure you'd be so happy about it now. So think really carefully about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, you know, it is, it's a permanent decision. And, you know, how many, you know, I think of all the decisions I've made, choices I've made, and, you know, how many of them have really been permanent? You know, how many of them have been, you know, have not undergone some revision or some modification over the years, and making different marks to your body, you know, different piercings or whatever that have a much more permanent status. And so, yeah, so it's, I think there was some wisdom to the rabbis above and beyond, you know, not mutilating your body. It's like, you know, you may not be so happy about this, you know, when you're in your 70s. And the skin has shifted a bit from when you were 25. And
So I have a question. So then,
Yeah,
is the
Patty.
body a sacred space, and who defines it?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. It is sacred, and I think that is one of the messages that comes through in this distinction of how human beings are created versus how everything else in creation comes into existence. That there is this element of God that is a part of our creation, and that elevates how we should understand ourselves. It elevates us into the sacred. And I think, again, it's meant to mediate how it is that we think of ourselves, how it is that we make decisions about ourselves, in terms of behavior, how we treat others, how we let others treat us. You know, what kinds of situations are you going to put yourself into? And it shifts, you know, it shifts the conversation, right? So, you know, if you're talking to your young teenage kids, or even younger, about their sexuality, and how it is that they should think about it, to you know, add that element into the conversation, I think is what Judaism brings into this, is that it is, you know, that you know, the what is the cliche, my body is a temple, kind of thing, but in a sense, not so much a temple, but it is a representation of God, right? And so it is, maybe it is that better translation of Mishkan, right? The Mishkan is the tabernacle, that dwelling place that the Israelites construct in the wilderness. We just finished Exodus, finished the construction of that tabernacle. But the Mishkan was a place for Shekhinah, for that indwelling presence of God. It's the same roots, the Shin, Kaf, Nun. And that if we think of ourselves as that mishkan, right, in a sense of that place where potentially God resides, again, it changes drastically what it is that we do to our bodies, to ourselves, the way we treat others, and again, what we allow others to do to us. So I think that's another powerful element of this particular idea, right? Why it's such a powerful idea, and why as we move down into this conversation that exists in Pirkei Avot, in the section of the Mishnah that is really dealing with aphorisms of how we are to live our lives, we have this, in a sense, this game of what's the most important mitzvah in the Torah, right? What's the most important instruction that we have in the Torah? And Rabbi Akiva says that the most important mitzvah, the most important instruction is love your neighbor as yourself, right? And oftentimes when I ask students, what's the most important instruction in the Torah, they'll either say it this way or they'll say it as Jesus said it, which is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. So this is, love your neighbor as yourself, is a similar idea. But Ben Azai says that no, the greatest principle is, this is the book of the generations of Adam. That's the greatest principle of Torah. And again, reflecting back to the creation of Adam, of this first human being, that the further expansion of this is that not only are we created in the image of God, but we're told that we're created in the image of God, right? So it could have happened we're just created in the image of God and we had no idea that was the case. And here that's the gift that we have, is that we know this. We have this knowledge, this understanding. And when we think about it, yeah, both are very, very powerful. And I don't know that I would say one is more important than the other. I think that, and I don't think that these rabbis would argue one is more important than the other. I think they were really trying to get to distill out what's the most essential teaching of this. And so here, we have love your neighbor as yourself. This is the generation of Adam. That imagine a world in which either one of those principles was the guiding principle for every human being, right? It would be paradise. There'd be no war, there'd be no fighting, there'd be no, it would be great, right? You love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Understand that everybody's created in the divine image. Everybody is, a human being, and sacred, and should be treated that way. And we're not there. We're not there yet. We have quite a ways to go. But it's this, I oftentimes am asked, do I, and I ask the question of others. Do you think that Genesis is in the Torah to give us a blow-by-blow account of how the world was created? And my answer always is no, it's not. This is, it's not to tell us that there were 6 24-hour periods of time in which God created the world. That's the important thing. That's not the important thing. The important thing is to, well, I guess first to understand that there is a creator, however we imagine, and there is a creation, however we may imagine that evolved or came into being. But of greater importance are the lessons that we can draw from this, right? That there is an order to the universe, and that there is this ideal that's set for us, that to recognize that we are all created in God's image, and all that entails, the responsibilities, the obligations that come upon us because of that fact. So those are the principal lessons, the important lessons that come out of a story that's, all kinds of traditions have a story of creation, how the world, you go to Greek mythology, you go to, everybody has that. And part of it is to try and get a sense of how everything came to be, but more important than that is to set out these ideals, these instructions that are hopefully going to bring us to live better lives, to create better communities, and to bring blessing into the world. So let me pause once more and unmute and see if there are comments, considerations, rebuttals. Alan?
Well, what this is making me think about is that, going back to your saying that we were all created in the image of God, and yet we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for things to change. That God can look at things differently and change, and perhaps thinking some of it about the changes in religion and the differences between what those who want to follow a very orthodox trend believe versus somebody that doesn't. That God believes it's okay. Things can change, and perhaps at different times or for different people, it needs to be different.
Yeah. I love that, because in that very first moment, even something changes, right? We go from the singular to the plural,
Right.
From one human being now to two. So even in that instant, right, there's change, right? So that sets it up and say, okay, yeah, things are going to continue to change, and they're going to continue to grow and look different, right? The first human being looks very different in that second instance, right? It's no longer one, it's now two. So yeah, I like that. I think that it sets up change as being a positive thing, of something that is part of the divine intention, right? That it was not meant to be static, that this is frozen in one particular way. Yeah. Good. Aline?
I was catching up with a friend of mine yesterday, and she has a son who decided to observe an Orthodox lifestyle when he went to college. And he now has 3 children, maybe ages 5 through 12 or so. And she was telling me yesterday that they don't know where the 3rd one came from, because the 2 oldest ones, along with the husband and wife, are wonderful, very, very wonderful people, and very serious. And the younger one dances through the house constantly and sings and likes fashion and all kinds of stuff like that. And she was commenting how the whole tenor of the household is different.
Right.
And I just was thinking about that, about the differences, and how that creates a climate for all of us that allows us to emerge in different ways.
Yeah, Kathy are in constant amazement. We have 4 children raised by the same 2 parents in the same house in pretty much the same way, and all 4 are completely different one from the other. Yeah. In their energy and their likes, their dislikes, everything. So yeah. Good. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity to be together and to study a little bit and to connect. And I believe that we're going to gather again on Wednesday at same time at 9:30, and we'll take the next of the ideas, the 3rd idea, walking the path, and we'll go forward from there. So
Thank you.
so.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, can you just resend out the study sheet that you had sent out?
If you go to the calendar for today, there's a link, and it'll pull the sheet for you.
Perfect, thank
Okay.
you.
All
Yeah.
right.
Have
Take
a
care,
good day.
everyone.
Rabbi, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.